Welcome everyone and good afternoon. This is the continuation of the adjourned Performance, Finance and Customer Focus Overview and Scrutiny Committee from Monday the 12th of September when the meeting was adjourned as part of the period of national mourning. So for those watching online, this is the continuation meeting and the papers are available under that meeting date on the council website. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters. There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the council house. Please can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting and it is switched off when you're not using it, and that your mobile devices are turned to silent, which I'm just doing. The meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Warspite room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. We have apologies from Councillor Hayden, and Councillor Lang is substituting. Councillor Stevens and Councillor MacDonald is substituting. Councillor Toffen, Councillor Churchill and Councillor Finn. We therefore need to elect a vice chair for the purpose of this meeting. Do we have any nominations?
That's a yes, Mark.
It would normally, of course, be a different party, but if so, I am looking.
What does it entail?
Well, if anything happens to me, you're taking over chairing the meeting.
I'll give it a go. I've never done it.
Okay, that's right. Yeah. So we have a nomination for Councillor Whom? Thank you. Yeah. Just do a quick bit of furniture rearranging. Okay, moving on to declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda? I don't see any indications. Minutes of the meeting of the 29th of June 2022. Do I have a proposer for accepting those minutes?
Chair, I'm happy to propose those minutes.
Thank you. We have Councillor Lowry and Councillor Partridge to propose and second, and thank you, George, you were pipped to the post. I have no items of urgent business. So we will move on to the policy brief, which is in the main pack, pages 13 to 16. Now, on a number of things in order to make our work more effective, we've not asked officers to introduce them, and we'll move straight to questions. So this is one of those. Do we have any questions on the policy brief? I see no hands going up. Kevin, welcome. This is the first time you've done the policy brief with us, and it looks like you're being let off lightly. because no one has any
Very
questions
kind.
for you.
Well, you said you didn't want an introduction, Councillor, so if there are no questions, then
So we can,
I'm happy to move on.
yep, that would be great, and we'll save time. Just as a point of note on policy briefs, if people do have questions, if you let us have them in advance, it'll help Kevin prepare answers, because we might well have stuff on the policy brief that aren't his area of expertise, and he can make sure he liaises with service to get them. So if you, on future agendas, policy brief, if you let Helen know of any questions, that'd be really useful, and Kevin will be able to give us a better service. But thank you very much for popping in to see us this afternoon, Kevin.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor.
On our work programme, pages 17 to 22, we have a programme of work at the moment. The Safer Plymouth update, we've agreed we'll try and focus on hate crime, not only hate crime reporting, but what happens when reports are made. Community Connections and the Chief Exec's office are still both working to try and make sure that that information is available from the police. So if it's not available by the next meeting, we will slip that item in order that we can do proper scrutiny. But I think rather than just hearing a big overarching "aren't we all wonderful" report from Safer Plymouth, which is the norm, we thought we'd dig into something in support of the Equalities and Diversity Action Plan, where we were asked to do specifically that item. Other than that, the review of the Plymouth Community Covenant has been slipped to November the 7th. Requests, please, for members. We need 3 Conservative and 1 Green member to join that group. Labour have appointed there too. So anyone interested, please let Helen know, but please pass that into your groups as well. And other dates are still being set on others. The one on Syria, Afghanistan and Ukraine has had to be slipped because I'm not available as I'm doing something as Deputy Lord Mayor that day. No doubt we will have added to the list by the end of today, and we will then work to get that timetabled. Any other questions on the work programme?
Chair, I note we've got a meeting on the, forgive me, I'm just scrolling down, the 30th of November.
Yeah.
Which will once again be discussing Finance Monitoring Report and the Elections Bill implications. Just turning to the Financial Monitoring Report, it would be good to understand what the current timeline is from the administration in respect of where they might be in respect of their decision-making process around further opportunities for savings. And I would encourage us to ensure that our meeting timeline reflects that the administration finishing its work so we can meet immediately, or even a subgroup be set up to meet with the administration to oversee some of the changes being proposed and then come back to this committee if that helps. And secondly, the election bill implications. From memory, that's getting rather late in the day now for us to implement it if it is legislation that the government chooses to move forward on. So I'd kind of like some feedback as to the likelihood of this actually happening, because if it does, we've got a problem in this administration that we won't be able to act it in sufficient time for the next elections in May. Simply won't have the time to go to do it, nor, dare I say, the legislation in place. So it'd be good to understand where we are with respect to those 2 items, please.
If I do the first one or the second one first, because that's the easier one, we slipped the Elections Bill implications to that meeting at the request of officers, because they are still waiting for guidance from the government, and felt that to have a meeting where guidance wasn't given would mean that actually we were left a bit in the dark. They appreciate that 30th of November is a little later than they would have liked, but they would have hoped to have had the guidance before now anyway, so that they could have been reporting at this meeting, which was the original schedule. But Glenda is confident that she will be able to report to us by the 30th of November talk us through what is happening and the implications in Plymouth, and the potential cost implications of that as well. So we've slipped that one at the request of officers because government guidance hasn't been given. So I trust Glenda to do the right thing by that, and Glenda has been pushing that we do look at it. So I trust her. It's not an avoidance of the issue. In terms of finance monitoring, I think that's a sensible thought in terms of how we dovetail with decision making and everything else for in-year scrutiny of this year's budget as opposed to next year's budget scrutiny, which Scrutiny Management Board are looking at. If it's all right with you, Councillor Lowry, maybe after this meeting we can have a discussion with Councillor Shea about timelines, and if it needs something we can either call an additional meeting of this panel or ask for volunteers for a subgroup to meet, depending on the nature of the discussion, if that's all right with you and Councillor Shea.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair, absolutely. We'll look forward to that if it's not been precluded by our other discussions anyway. And can I just put forward, excuse me for not wearing a tie as I normally would do on a day like this for this kind of meeting. However, I've got a throat infection at the moment and it's causing my throat to swell up, so hence no wearing a tie. However, I can assure you it's not COVID, I have tested. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Can I come back to the election bill implications that Councillor Lowry raised? I appreciate that the lack of government guidance might lead to some difficulties, but not having an indication of what has to be done is going to lead to difficulties for everybody else who is intending to vote on May the whatever it is. My understanding is that photo ID is going to be required, and it's a matter of how it's implemented. But for people who don't have photo ID, arrangements are going to have to be made for them to, well, first of all, to get to know, and secondly, to be able to get whatever pass is required is decided upon issued. So I appreciate it's very difficult to tell us what's happening without government guidance, but it's very difficult for everybody else out there to get themselves ready if they don't know what they're preparing for, and May is upon them before they realise they needed to do something.
I think Glenda would not disagree with you. However, Glenda is not able to tell us what sort of photo ID will or will not be acceptable because the government haven't said that yet, and they haven't told councils what photo ID will be acceptable or what councils are or are not able to process and produce, or whether it's going to be done through some other system that they determine. Apparently, the council will be given money for a camera if the council needs to produce photo ID. But that's about as far as we've got. Now, Glenda feels that scrutiny needs a bit more certainty than, I don't know whether it's us or the government or another agency, and if it's us, we've got a camera, but we don't know what to do with it type thing, because she feels that that isn't the best use of our time. And I tend to agree with her. She is working really hard on this, and I have had conversations with her about it. And I think it is better that we give her the opportunity to come and present what we have to do and everything the council is planning, so that we are then able to make any recommendations about what other actions might need to be taken, and to make sure that the fullest number of people are both on the register and have the appropriate identification documents to be able to actively go and vote. And Glenda is concerned that both happen. And I'm sure she, when it comes to her report, will talk about some of the implications of photo ID on voter registration and voter turnout, which I know are also things she wants to discuss with us, but she needs to know more about the photo ID before she can work out what that means. So rather than us have a circular discussion today, she'd rather come next time and give us the opportunity to scrutinise actions and make recommendations.
Can I come back, please, Chair? Because everything you says makes extremely good sense. And if we were preparing for an election in May 2024, everything would be fine, but we're looking at May 2023. November the 30th, perhaps what might be happening, or may not, but nothing is likely to happen out there in December, which leaves 3 months.
The legislation hasn't changed, been enacted
So
yet.
I think we are in a position where legislation hasn't been enacted, government guidance hasn't been drawn or presented, and so we are in a really difficult position. I don't disagree with you. Glenda doesn't disagree with you. At the moment, we have nothing to scrutinise, and so she's asked for us to defer it, not because she wants it deferred, but because she wishes scrutiny to be effective. And I think, you know, she isn't here today. We don't have a paper today. Our next meeting is on the 30th. If she were to request that we did something sooner, I'm sure members would be happy for us to meet sooner to specifically talk about the elections bill. At the moment, that is the date she thinks she will be able to have worked through what the guidance means and the implications of it, prepared a paper in order for us to publish and be together. If it comes differently, then we will work out how best to handle that. But at the moment, we're working under officer guidance as to when national government will do something. And no one seems to be able to pin that any closer than the stuff we have from Glenda. It did seem to me that it was pretty fruitless to spend half an hour, three-quarters of an hour speculating without having any definite information for people in Plymouth. And we would rather go out with a scrutiny that was on fact, with recommendations about actions that the administration in Plymouth should take to ensure the maximum number of people are on the register with appropriate voter ID, knowing what they need to do next May in order to vote in May. Personally, I think that trying to bring something in this quickly is ludicrous, but that is not my decision. I like everyone else sitting around this table, have to go with what a government minister decides, and we can have the debate about what that means at the next meeting, or a meeting where we discuss that if it is a separate meeting. But we will work with Glenda on what's the best way to do it.
As a last thought, Chair, is it worth us recommending that the council asks the LGA to impress on the relevant government minister that speed is of the essence?
I'm sure we can do that, and I'm sure I can write to the chair of the relevant LGA board, asking them to take that forward. So moving to tracking decisions, pages 23 to 28. I note that some of them are becoming quite aged. There's the ones in white, which are waiting response. December 2021 is getting quite old. I think with that one, if we don't get a response pretty quickly, I'm going to have to write to the Chief Executive, because we're 10 months awaiting a response isn't appropriate in scrutiny terms. Items marked in grey have been completed. Do anyone have any comments on any of the tracking decisions? These are things that we've asked for. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's to do with the recycling rates and that. It says we're lagging behind other cities or towns or villages. in the rest of the country. Whether we're going to be able to pick that up and or increase our performance on that. But also, when it states here on number 4 that it is cheaper to dispose of the waste rather than recycle it. Now, is this going to be a carte blanche decision that we're going to stop or reduce our recycling rates because of the cost? And also, if I can ask here, is will the garden waste be reintroduced next year? Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So for clarity, we want more information on the action plan relating to question 1 of the 29th of June, minute 9, in terms of how we get recycling rates in Plymouth up. Number 4, the response on garden waste, and I think there is, why are we disposing of stuff rather than composting stuff? Because composting is greener and disposal is less green, and what the future of garden waste collections are. So those are the 3 bits. I suggest the garden waste collections you might want to come back to when we talk about finance, because Councillor Shea could then talk about that, because I think that's probably more about finance than anything else. And I think maybe we ask the recycling team to come back on the recycling rates and composting, as if that's all right.
Just to add on to that is, where would we be in a position when the government are setting targets for us to achieve, and we're not actually achieving that? And basically, it's the waste that's being incinerated rather than used for the purpose.
Yeah. So this is picking up on performance figures and the implications of those. So Helen, if you caught that, if you don't quite get it, maybe if you talk to Councillor Vincent afterwards. So we'll find some more information on that. But we'll no doubt look at performance figures, and these things might crop up again when we do that later in the agenda. Just a quick one from me. Item 5 on KPIs from the 29th of June. And I know this has been discussed at Management Board as well, but we do need to think about if a workshop will happen in September or October this year on scrutiny involvement on KPIs. We're beginning to run out of dates. So that one might now be slipping into November, but we do need to make sure that scrutiny are involved in setting KPIs so that we get KPIs that make sense to us as well as to the administration and officers. So thank you for that one. Councillor Lang, then Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, I can't quite work out how this is numbered. But anyway, I think I'm on page 26 about the deep dive into children's services. Has that happened? Is it available? It certainly hasn't come to my scrutiny as stated on there. So I just wondered if we could have an update on where we are with that. Thank you.
Thank you. We will chase that. I think the fact that we have a whole minute there from the 29th of June, where so far the majority of stuff seems not to have happened, is slightly worrying. And Councillor Shea, you might want to take that up with officers on how they follow through on scrutiny recommendations to ensure that scrutiny panels get the information that's requested in order to scrutinise things.
I certainly will, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say, and obviously the same goes for that, the written response regarding the £4 million savings target. June's quite a few months away from today, and we're well into the financial year. Thank you.
So Councillor Wheeler, then Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. This is again about 29th of June, minute 6 on the policy brief. The government's £300 million commitment to local authorities to prevent youth offending. We've asked for a response. We haven't had one. So that's 4 months now. I know we can't force a response, but could we perhaps send a reminder?
If I may, Chair, on that one, I am able to give a very partial update. Just we did chase around this one, and I understand that was the national amount. We did receive a tiny part of the national amount. That's as much of an update as I'm able to give you right away. Apparently a response has been drafted, and I should be able to get that to the panel fairly shortly after the meeting.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Page 37, 5.1, the big listen, employment engagement survey.
Can we come back to that one when we hit that agenda item? We're not quite there yet. Don't worry, we're picking up on the tracking decisions that relate to previous performance reports. Just one thought from me. We did ask on the 29th of June, minute 12, for a written part 2 report on leisure services. We are scrutinising today without a written report. In future, if a panel requests a written report for a future scrutiny, can we make sure we have it? I noticed that some of the officers responsible are sitting on the call, and it is really important that scrutiny see things for effective scrutiny, not get presented things at the last minute in a meeting to try and scrutinise as they hear. So in future, if the panel requests a written report, please can we have a written report? We're beginning to get a bit of a pattern here of not getting responses to things, and it just begins to look like someone is trying to hide the more of that we have. I'm sure that isn't the case, but it's how it might look to a member of the public or to a scrutineer. So, any more on tracking decisions? No. So we move on to the Return to Work Safely report. This is another one where we scrutinised 6 months ago, and we asked for a follow-up report. So rather than it being presented, we'll move straight to questions. And I think we have Kim Brown in the room to answer any questions on this one. And obviously, Councillor Share is here as well. So anything on the Return to Work Safely report?
Mine's a fairly minor detail, Chair. On 2.5 vaccinations, we're providing facilities at Windsor House, Guildhall, Prince Rock and Chelsen Meadow. It's a bit of a walk from Ballard House to the Guildhall. Is there a reason for not providing a facility at Ballard?
Thank you. Kim, do you want to pick that one up?
Thank you. The reason why we've looked at areas where we can get so the walk from Ballard House, the Guildhall is more central, so we can get more officers there. And this is something that we've done year on year, and the number of people that are able to attend. So we're only able to have X amount of clinics or we've got large enough venues, and that's the reason why we've chosen these. There's no other reason why we haven't, and we haven't had, as a result of that, because we advertise in advance, any negative impact as a result of having these 3 sites, councillors.
Okay, if there's no demand.
Thank you, Councillor Lowry, then Councillor Lang, then Councillor MacDonald.
Sort of 2 questions. First question relating to we talk about COVID, but obviously we'll be aware now that we've got COVID that would combine with a flu epidemic, a stroke vaccine as well at the same time. And I know from previous experiences in this council that we have had an impact upon our employees when there is a considerable, want for a better word, an outbreak in our city. So, you know, we've got the possibility of both a considerable increase in COVID affecting our sickness rate, along with flu as well. So I would like to understand what measures the administration are considering to take that risk on board and what they might be doing, because, you know, we're already seeing, dare I say, you know, the most obvious example being on the street scene, where we've got a reduction in the number of available HGV drivers or sort of bin persons to assist us. If everyone goes sick, you know, and everyone gets COVID and everyone gets sort of flus and stuff like that, we may well have an implication on our ability to deliver services. So it'd be great to understand what we're doing from a strategic perspective to deal with that scenario. And my second question relates to, sorry, Chair, relates to our accommodation strategy. I'd like to see a bit more speed. It seems to me that some of the measures that were previously in place when I had the luxury of sitting with Councillor Shea haven't really moved on very much. So perhaps like him or the officer responsible to explain quite what you've been doing over this period of time, because we need to move along quickly because it just costs money. So there's two issues there, please. Thank you.
I see Councillor Shea hovering again. So I'll let you go first, Councillor Shea.
Through yourself, Chair. Thank you very much, Councillor. It gives a positive overview of the Council's arrangements protecting employees from workplace transmissions, including joint working with the trade unions, vaccination, safe systems of work and lateral flow testing. I'm pleased to commend that the current arrangements, that only 11 workplace transmissions were reported to the HSE, and on a risk-based assessment, in consideration the 2,500 plus employees that we have, do we really consider that as a requirement to re-emphasise? Only 11 transmissions, reported transmissions?
Chair, there's 1.3 million people in the country who currently got COVID. That went up from 1.1 million last year. It would appear from those who know better than me that there's a distinct likelihood of a considerable continued outbreak in the United Kingdom alongside flu. And my point being, if both those two coincide during the winter period, that will have an effect on our workforce, which will have an effect on our ability to deliver services. So my question is, what are you doing about that potential thing happening? Alongside the other question was, why aren't we moving the accommodation strategy along at a much greater speed, please?
Kim, would you like to go into more depth on this one?
Thank you, Councillor Shea. So in relation to what we're doing, so the first thing we're doing is that we're actively encouraging all the workforce to undertake to have their vaccines as appropriate and encouraging them to have their COVID vaccine. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we have safe systems of work. So what we do with public health is review our practices and what we're doing within the organisation to keep the workforce safe. So that is something that we're currently reviewing to make sure that whatever measures we have in place are fit for purpose and actually mitigates any risk against our workforce contracting COVID. As you can appreciate, we can have all these in place for the workplace, but then you've got we're educating the workforce in relation to living with COVID and all the basic things like washing hands, social distancing, etc., etc. So we're going to be reinforcing that so that all the good work that we did over the past 2 years, that actually we've got a good foundation on which to build in relation to education. So as I said, we're working very closely with public health, and we do also have what we call a traffic light system, that in the event that the numbers do increase within the city and the working population, that there are ways that we will actually look at actually mitigating that risk. So we've got a traffic light system that we will review in conjunction with public health and keep communicating. I think that's the main things that we can do at this point in time.
Maybe, Andy, you'd like to pick up on accommodation.
So I just pick up the accommodation, Chair, thank you. So you'll be aware that it's quite a complex picture. So Windsor House will be fully decanted by the end of March. Midland House will be in the summer. And some of those delays, Councillor Lowry, of
Sorry, this summer or next
summer
summer?
23 for Midland House. So Windsor House by March, end of March, and Midland House by the summer. And some of the delays have been borne on a number of complex factors. So first, our partners signing the lease agreement for Crown Hill Court, that took longer than expected. We had to have also some issues with supplies of goods going into Crown Hill Court, and also the move of the data centre and print and doc services, which will be coming out of Windsor House as well. And then the redevelopment of Ballard House, so the ground floor which will host children's services, that's currently going out for tender at the moment, and we are looking at ways where we can potentially have an interim solution for staff at Midland House, but there are, as you know, some complex health and safety requirements that you need for that service on the ground floor for Ballard. So we are progressing as quickly as we can, and Councillor Share is already raised that we need to accelerate that with the team, and we're looking at that at the moment. Thank you.
Moving on to Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Point 2.6, lateral flow testing. It says that there'll be a review date around the supplying of free LFTs on the 30th of September. So can you update us where we are around supplying free LFTs? Thanks.
Is that Kim?
Sorry, I had difficulty getting off mute. So in relation to the testing, what we're doing at the moment is looking at the staff who are saying that they're not available for work because they're ill, and actually we've got a system of providing them. We've purchased some lateral flow testing kits. And what we've got is a process for sending those to staff, frontline staff, predominantly because office-based staff are able to work from home. So those that are delivering services, so as you will be aware that social workers, etc., can have access. But for other staff like our frontline services, waste, etc., we have a system for providing them with lateral flow testing. And it's something that we have to keep under constant review to make sure that it's used appropriately. Councillor.
So your review date of have you reviewed it since the 30th of September or not yet?
We're starting collating the information, so we haven't got all the data at the moment. But as part of the review of safe systems of working, we're collating that information. We have reviewed it, so we know which areas need to have supplies, but we do have a process of if it's needed, what the process is, etc. But as you've asked already, we're at the moment reviewing all our process safe systems of working. So in relation to lateral flow testing, it's making sure that we've got enough, because there is a cost associated with it. I can't actually say here in the meeting how many have been issued at this point in time, because I think that's a question that's been posed. But I can get that if needed.
Thank you. Can I ask another question around, so employees who are working outside of their home undertaking twice weekly tests, I wondered whether you've considered about whether that should be extended to members, because we are out and about in our community you know, community meetings, meeting people, doing things out and about in our wards, whether the option of free LFT should apply to us as well.
Councillor Lang, that's something I'm going to have to take away and discuss with public Director of Public Health. So I'll come back to you and come back to elected members in response to that query, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I happened to read in the Herald that, whether this is correct or not, I'm not entirely sure, but we've currently got one of the highest rates of COVID in the country, so it's obviously very prevalent in Plymouth at the minute, and we all need to be mindful of that. Thanks.
Thank you. So if you are able, Kim, to provide us an update on LFT update and your decision making once you've done your review, as well as coming back with an answer to that question about whether members should be treated as frontline people, that would be quite useful. I spot Ruth is on the call, so I'm sure she's clocked that as well. We'll add those to our tracking decisions. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at section 5 on page 37, 5.1 specifically, the big listen. You've got there was a 50.9% response rate, which would be less than valid or reliable. So quite justifiably, you've now got an external market research company aiming to get a higher response rate. So you won't lack validity and reliability if that's successful. My question is, you've asked about perception, employer leadership, and I wondered if there was any further market research being done on this issue. When will we get the results is what I'm asking for, and can they be shared with elected members?
Okay, if I respond, Councillor Pemberthy?
If you could, yes, please.
Okay, so the big listen, at the moment, we've got the high level returns that tells us exactly the number of respondents and how they responded to questions. And the analysis is just, we're waiting for the high level. So we've got the high level data, but the analysis, we're at the moment, we've received those and we're just going through those. So they have to be discussed at SLT level in relation to what we're going to do in relation to responses. And then what we'll have to do is communicate with the workforce in relation to what the action is going to be. One of the things that staff has said is that having confidence that whatever's highlighted or flagged in the employee engagement survey, that it will be followed through and there'll be actions, and that's one of the things that we've committed to. We used an external provider and the response rate was 51%. However, the reason why we've used an external company is because we want to give the workforce confidence that whatever they said or whatever they're saying to us is in confidence, and that actually we're going to be able to benchmark with other public sector organisations. And I say that, once I say that, I'm talking about that not all organisations are the same. So there are some questions that can be benchmarked. So in short, in response to your question, is that we anticipate that the early part of November, that we'll be able to have the high level information that we're able to share much widely.
Thank you. So that would include elected members then, suitably anonymised?
The data will be anonymised, yes, it will be.
As we as a panel have responsibility for workforce, might I suggest that we add this to the November meeting and get a presentation on the big listen results and headlines, and could we invite, as well as Kim and the appropriate cabinet member, our 3 trade union leads as well, so that they're able to reflect back to us from their perspectives so that we have staff side as well as officer and administration perspectives on the big listen at that meeting. Okay, Kim,
Thank
sorry.
you, Chair.
Just so that's a heads up for 30th of November. I have one question then. On trade union engagement on 2.4, you mentioned that there are current concerns about the way that COVID absence might be triggering stuff in the managing absence policy and the way long COVID is being viewed. I just wondered whether you'd like to unpack a little further about where the trade union concerns are and where we might go to alleviate those.
So during COVID, a decision was made that if someone had experienced COVID, then that would not add to. But when we talk about absence monitoring, each occasion when an individual's not available for work, then that will it will accumulate. It will, so for example, we say that we measure on the basis of number of incidents and duration. And because COVID is as such, a decision was made, just like any other organisation, that COVID will not contribute to any trigger levels that we have within the absence policy. So that means going into a formal meeting, etc. Because of the nature of COVID, so those restrictions were in place. Most organisations removed them earlier in the year. We as an organisation decided that we would review that in autumn, because the anticipation is that those numbers may go up again. And it's about actually making sure that we're able to support individuals to come back to work and not spread the virus within the organisation. The trade unions wanted COVID to be, especially long COVID, that an individual's able to be off for a significant length of time, and it not have an impact on their sickness. Neither will it have an impact on their pay. As you're aware that we have, in relation to the Green Book, 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay. But when you get into the throes of is a person able to return to work after 2 years, etc.? Well, we had to do it case by case, so we couldn't have a policy that was a blanket policy, because at the end of the day, we've got to support the individual, but we've also got to ensure that we're able to run the business. So we're in conversations with the trade unions, and it's just one. It's one thing. It's not many things that actually we still have to have discussions in relation to how we deal with long COVID. At the moment, according to our records, we've got 2 people with long COVID, and they're back in the workplace. And we feel that we're able to support individuals in the workplace with reasonable adjustments if they're suffering from long COVID. So that's where we are as an organisation. So having a one size does not fit all, but being quite a responsive employer at the same time, recognising that we need to deliver services is our approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And I know when we asked for this report to come in, we did ask for staff side perspectives as well. So thank you for putting those in and for explaining them. That seems perfectly logical. And I'm sure if staff side are listening and want to raise anything with me, they know where I am and they can write to me. But in terms of scrutiny, I think you've done what we asked you to do. So thank you for that, Kim. I don't see anyone else raising. Oh, Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a bit about the accommodation strategy, which was using buildings and sites that weren't Plymouth City Council ones, like Market Hall and Ocean Studios and things like that. I think that was done as a pilot project. Just wondering what the outcome was of that.
I think that's you, Andy.
Sorry, you repeat that, sorry.
I was just asking about the pilot project where you were trialling using Plymouth City Council spaces like Market Hall and Ocean Studios.
Sorry. So we've concluded the pilot. It was really successful, and I think there was a lot of engagement from especially people who are working flexibly at home. The issue that we've got at the moment is we were all very nervous, I think, about the amount of people that were going to return to the office at Ballard House especially, and we've not seen that take up. So I think at the moment we're about 25% of occupancy. So we've stopped the pilot at the moment on the basis that we need to make sure we've got the maximum use out of our own office spaces first and foremost, and we'll revisit it in the winter because we do believe, given the energy crisis and the cost of energy more generally, that we will see an uptick in people coming to the office over the winter period. And as part of the broader accommodation strategy, obviously there's a second phase. So Councillor Lowry's already mentioned some of the key accommodation that we're looking at. But actually, when we look at the combination of Crown Hill Court and Ballard House being our sort of two key offices, and then with a number of satellite sites, we'll probably see that we can reduce down further but get greater use out of Market Hall and Devonport Library, etc., as being satellite sites. So I think it's a pause at the moment, but we will return to it in the winter.
Sorry, did you say Devonport Library as a satellite site?
Devonport Guildhall. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on that? No. I think that's been useful discussion, and thank you very much, Kim, for joining us for that one. I don't think you're back on our agenda today, so thank you for coming in. We are now running half an hour behind schedule, but I think it's been important to have that discussion. And the next two papers we will have introduced. So on this one, welcome Councillor Shea and David Northey. Between you, you have 5 minutes. We won't look at the finance report that was in the supplement pack dated September, because we have issued to the panel the period 5 report. So we'll look at the period 5 report rather than the period 3 report, because that makes more sense, I think. So over to you two. That's in the supplement pack that was issued on Friday for members.
Right, thank you, Chair. David, to save my voice, can I let you lead on for this one, please?
Oh, you is that called a hospital pass, Councillor Shea? I think it is.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. So first of all, apologies, I suppose, for the lateness of the publication of this report, but I think it's important that you get the most up-to-date information and we're not talking about history. So the report that's in front of you now is as at month 5, so we're up to August. We're heading into the end of the second quarter, which you'll get as soon as it's available. And this is now showing that the position to the end of March, to the end of the financial year, is an overspend of 6.656 million. That is an improvement on the report that you saw previously, and I'm quite happy to talk you through that one. I think where we are, and it says in the report, it's all about the fact of, and we've identified it in a separate schedule, what we're calling unforeseen cost. So impact of utility and what's been going on in terms of pay settlement, although it's still not settled for this year, but we've had to put in our latest estimate. So that's driven up the cost by about 6 million. So there's a couple of ways of looking at this report, I suppose. You could say if it wasn't for those unforeseeable costs, actually the council would be in a very good position at month 5 with a relatively small overspend. But we've got a long way to go, and we've got the best part of 6 months to clear what's remaining of £6.656 million. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you. I'm sure that there will be some hands going up now.
I'm sure.
Who's going to break the silence?
So I'm confused. Is there another finance report coming later, or are we just So, yeah, I'm just probably looking at the old report here.
An additional supplement was published on Friday, which are the month 5 figures.
Yeah.
Councillor Wheeler.
Can I turn to page 9, Chair? Under the Customer and Corporate Services and Chief Exec savings, the SLA for the Theatre Royal is being reduced by 100,000. What are we actually paying the Theatre Royal, please?
Oh, as always, that's a very good question, Councillor. I haven't got that detail in front of me, but yeah, sorry, I haven't got that detail. I can get back to you on
Andy
that one.
Rolfs might have.
Oh, Andy might have it. Okay.
Can I declare an interest here, actually, before you start talking about this? Because my husband is employed by the theatre. I think I just better say that, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. We'll record that.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wheeler, I think the amount we pay currently is 350,000 per annum after the 150,000 was taken.
So
we pay 350,000 grant to the Theatre Royal on an annual basis once you take that off the amount.
So that's reducing to 250.
That will I have to confirm. I'll have to confirm whether that's the 350 is with the money already taken or additional, but I'll double check that and come back to you.
Okay, thank you. Could I have another one, Chair? A little bit further down the same section, bus shelter advertising, saving 75,000. Is this associated with the new contract? And would it be very unfair of me to associate that with the removal of 200 odd bus shelters?
This is an income generation opportunity, Councillor. So once we've got into the negotiations with the new provider, we feel we can increase the amount of advertising, which will give us 75,000 extra revenue.
I'm not quite sure. So we're getting paid a bit more for the advertising, but
Yeah.
we're not doing so much cleaning and provision of shelters. I see the two things as linked, part of the same contract. But am I being unfair?
I'm not sure that it's necessarily the same contract, Councillor Wheeler, but again, I will have to get the detail, but I'm quite happy to get your written response on that one.
So we've got...
Sorry.
On our tracking, we've now got a written response on the Theatre Royal and a written response on bus shelters.
I'll get that out straight away, don't worry.
So I'm sure there'll be more by the time we get to the end of this one. Who's next for a question? Councillor Hume.
Hi everyone. Can I ask the question with the grants? Who supplies the grants? Does that come from Plymouth City Council, or is the grants that are issued come outside? Well, so, when we talk about the Theatre Royal get a grant.
That's coming out of the general fund for Plymouth City Council, so that's at our discretion. We set that up. And
this money, the grants are within the Plymouth City Council. That's from
within our budget. Yes,
I get it. From
yeah. So we've decided to give them support, and what we're saying is during the current year we're reducing that support to help us to balance the budget.
Does that cause the Theatre Royal a problem if they get less money grant, or is
the economic development team have worked very closely with the theatre to make sure that it's acceptable to both parties.
All right, thanks very much.
Obviously, they would like to have the continuation.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Chair. So, made considerable progress from 14.8 million down to 6.6 million, and
Yeah.
you have suggested that in some respects an awful lot of these costs are coming as a consequence of unforeseen circumstances, and I do have a high degree of sympathy with respect to that point in some aspects. I note that we are applying nearly £1.6 million of reserves in this occasion. I would like to understand at some stage where we are with working balances and how that relates to a percentage of our net revenue figure. There is a long way to go to balance the books in respect of some £6.6 million being outstanding, given we've already knocked out somewhere in the region of, well, 7.7 plus another £1 million that has been prudently set aside, plus the reserves. So we really are, dare I say, scrabbling around and putting our hands down the back of the sofa to find some money. And understandably that you were doing that, I get that. But £6.6 million outstanding at this stage of the financial year, when you've already worked incredibly hard to get to where you are, you're going to have to make some significant decisions that is going to result in changes to workforce, changes to services, changes to fees and charges, and so on and so forth. And I'm just nervous that time is ticking on, and actually we're not being presented that, and it's not happening because there ain't that long to go, guys. You know, we're talking about 6 months to the end of the financial year. And whilst I do sympathise with the respect that there are some considerable additional costs, you know, but if you go to page 5 of the report, Children's Services, once again, Children's Services, exactly the same situation. There's been no change in period 4 to where we are now. The overspend is still what it was 3 months ago, and we don't seem to have a plan to get it down. You know, 3.8 million overspend on top of a rebalancing budget last year of another £4 million. It's like the wheel just keeps churning. Nothing changes, you know. Even if the mouse changes, it still goes at the same speed. You know, every year we put 4 million a year in, and every year we overspend by 4 million. And I'm just struggling to see where we go moving forward, because, you know, all the stuff that gets said in the past, there's a black hole that exists at the moment, and you guys need to get a grip, because if you don't get a grip soon, it will be gone, and we'll have to do some drastic cuts to local services unless you come up with a plan and start doing it very soon. So I want to hear some confidence that you guys have got this and you're going to do something about it, because 6.6 million at this stage is still a lot of money, and I grant you've gone from 14.4 down to this, but there's still a long way to go, and a lot of work needs to be done.
Okay. Through you, Chair, shall I take that in the first instance?
I think,
In terms...
are we going to squabble over this one?
No, you carry on, Councillor.
If I start off on this one, through yourself, Chair, thank you very much, Councillor, for your sympathy. That's really appreciated. Absolutely. As you know, we are not leaving any stone unturned here, and we've been through every single directorate, first pass and several other passes, and we continue to do so. And as we move forward month on month, we are actually gaining more and more savings out of this. I won't go into specifics because the tale will be long and distinguished. However, we have other ideas and we have other proposals in train at the moment, and they are certainly travelling through. If I can bring David in here to tail off on this one, but believe me, a significant amount of effort has gone into especially the children's service areas and the considerable savings that they've already achieved as part of this. Yes, there is a comprehensive plan. Yes, there are additional moves coming forward, and David might be able to take you through some of that that's currently in train. Thank you, David. Over to yourself.
Thank you, Mark. Can I just say, and Councillor Lowry, you'll forgive me for saying this, but at this time of the year, it's not unusual to be showing an overspend on the in-year budget. So it is not nice having a 6.6 million, but I think if it said something like 3 million, we'd probably be saying, well, that's normal and that will eke its way out. So I think we're kind of 50% towards the problem that we've got to solve, but I'm absolutely not walking away from the fact that an awful lot of effort's gone in to get us to where we are, and there is still 6.6 to find. So we have gone through the plan that's set out in the report, and we keep going round and around. In terms of children's, I think you were discussing earlier, I was listening to you saying that you've asked for a deep dive into the children's budgets. Quite happy to do that. We've done it ourselves before, Councillor Lowry, and satisfied you about the numbers, but you're absolutely right to challenge that it's still going in the wrong direction. So quite happy to revisit that one. And then your first comment was about trying to understand our working balance and where that might leave us. We're currently standing at 8.4 million against a net budget of 198 million. So it's about 4.2%. We have said in the past that the industry standard is to try and get as close as we can to 5%. That's not a statutory requirement. That's sort of an industry average, if you like. So we are still working on a plan to get us to that 5%, but we're currently at 4.2 at 8.4 million. So I think that covers your points, Councillor Lowry.
Okay, thank you. Before I go on to Councillor Lang, the bit you heard earlier, David, was on the 29th of June. We had promised written response on the £4 million saving target in Children's Services Directorate and how it would be delivered. We haven't received that yet. We were also told that there was a deep dive going on into children's services at that point in time, and we were told, therefore, that information as a result of that would be being done by the Strategic Director for Finance and the Portfolio Holder for Finance and Children's Services, and the Shadow Portfolio Holder for Finance, would be provided to members of both this panel and the Children and Young People's panel. And Councillor Lang, who's subbing today, said that her panel hasn't received it, and neither has this. So there are two outstanding issues from children's at the last panel that we were promised by the then Section 151 officer. So those were two of the bits that would probably help us understand this slightly better were they to be provided. So I'm sure that those coming through soon will help both this panel and Councillor Lang's panel, which leads me nicely on to Councillor Lang, who put her hand up.
Thank you. I take your point, David, that, you know, an overspend at this time of year is not unusual, but this comes after you've already kind of found, as Councillor Shea says, no stone unturned and found £8 million of savings, and this is where we are. I was just wondering, Councillor Shea, if you would share with us what your thoughts are about how, you know, some of the sort of more unpleasant things you might have to do. Are you considering things like turning down street lighting? Are you considering things like not reinstating garden waste collection? Can you give us an indication of your thinking on some of the more drastic measures you might have to take?
Through yourself, Chair, if I answer that, yes, we're not looking at reinstating garden waste collections for the remainder of this year. What was the other point that you brought forward? Oh, the street lighting. We are considering the reduction in voltage to street lighting through the mechanisms that we're fitting to those street lights. However, we've been led to believe at present, yet to finish the trial of it, that it won't in actual fact reduce the lux value that those lights give out. So therefore, we won't be depriving any area in Plymouth, as far as we know, of any reduced level of lighting. But as I said, a part of the plan here is to not leave any stone unturned, and at present I'm still turning stones.
Okay, I know that the garden waste isn't going to continue this year. What I'm talking about is, have you got any plans to reinstate it at any point?
Absolutely, I expect to reinstate garden waste collections next year.
Thank you.
Councillor Hume, you whispered a question in my ear, but you can ask it publicly.
Thank you, Chair. Going forward into next year then, will there be a cost for garden waste?
Thank you for your question there, Councillor. At present, I can't answer that question because the decision hasn't been made.
Will we know that in the foreseeable future before the next kind of budget?
Of course, we will know that the answer to that question in the fullness of time, and it will be before the next budget.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Any more questions on finance report? No, I think, you know, obviously the details of the 6 million are going to be key. The sooner we get those, the better. As Councillor Lowry has said, we've got less than 6 months of this financial year left now, because we're into October. So making those is going to be quite important. If you, after the meeting, if we're able to come up with a timetable as to whether November the 30th is the appropriate time for us to look at those, or whether we do need to do something between now and then as scrutiny in terms of those, what I imagine will be quite painful decisions in the short term. We can work that out then, but we will certainly be looking, I think, with close interest at that.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And of course, we have the joys of budget scrutiny being planned at the moment as well, which I know you're aware of. So that takes us through finance, and we then go on to performance. Performance is in the main report pack on pages 43 to 86. And Ross, I think you're giving us a very, very quick introduction to this.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll be as brief as possible as directed. So just for some context, then we provide performance report for your consideration, and just to set some expectations, I probably won't be able to provide detailed answers on any particular area, but always happy to go away and get those. Second part of this agenda item relates to risk. As previously discussed at the Scrutiny Management Board and at Audit and Governance, this is a recommendation from Audit and Governance that scrutiny panels do review strategic risks in relation to their area. Now, what I would say, both of these reports are now quite old, given they're Q1, and what you can expect as a committee is in the next 6 weeks you'll have further updates in November against both performance and risk. But just to highlight some good performance in the last quarter. Employment rate has increased. That's now turned to green. We've seen a reduction in repeat referrals to children's social care and some improved adult social care outcomes. We are still facing some performance challenges though. So children who are subject to multiple child protection plans is on the increase. We are having an issue with full-time equivalent days lost to sickness. And of course, as you've just discussed, spend against budget. Those are the areas in performance that I would highlight, Chair. In terms of risk, there's 3 red risks on the strategic risk register that the committee might want to consider. Certainly the first one is spend against budget, which was amber, now red. I will assume will continue to be red until we've addressed that £6 million overspend. But of course, you've just had that discussion. The other 2 red indicators are around IT. So the first is around cybersecurity. There is mitigations against that in the report, but Chair, it might be something that you consider for your work programme going forward. And we are seeing some problems with supply chain and lead times for technology, IT equipment. So the Council is obviously looking to plan very carefully around any procurements and do that with plenty of time. I think everything else, apart from IT, is generally covered by your work programme going forward, particularly with the addition of workforce in November. So I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Anyone got anything they would like to ask? Councillor Lang.
Yeah, thank you. I note the repeat referrals to children's social care are going down marginally, which is good, heading in the right direction. But as you said, the children with multiple child protection plans is not going in the right direction. And I just wondered, I'm not sure who it will be, will talk us through the budgetary implications of that and what is going on to address that particular metric, because that's key to that service performing better and also helping with the budgetary pressures. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. I think that you've got both finance and some risk monitoring, along with a very specific scorecard on your agenda for Thursday. My suggestion would be it's probably best to ask that question now. I think you'll have the right people in the room to be able to provide a more fuller answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It's probably wishful thinking, but I spot David Northey is still on the call. There are some outstanding written responses, as we've already indicated, around children's. If there are to be discussions on Thursday around this, it might be helpful for Councillor Lang to have those written responses by Thursday as well, so that she's able to look at that in the full round. And we can then, as a panel, take comfort from any report from her panel that she has explored that in full. That'll save us doing it twice. Happy with that, Councillor Lang?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Lowry and Councillor Wheeler, in that order.
Chair, as you'd expect, given the nature of the issues we're discussing today, there's an undoubtable theme, which is obviously, you'd expect to see it in all elements, of course, money, but beneath money is, of course, workforce, because we don't do anything without the support of the workforce. And bearing in mind, on average, 60% of our expenditure is spent on employees providing a service on behalf of the council. So it's great to see that within the performance report, there is an appreciation that we're seeing an increase in sickness rates, which perhaps you'd expect. We've also discussed our kind of return to work policy around COVID and dare I say, seasonal flus that might well happen. And it's also, of course, reflected on 2 occasions in the Strategic Risk Register. And as the Vice Chair of Audit and Performance, I've asked for this data to come to us because actually, as you can see, those links do exist. And so a little bit nervous, and I don't quite know what the answer is. I suppose it's just me sort of expressing my nervousness that, we've got a situation where we're all stressed because we've got too much work to do. And guess what? We've got more work to do because this man's got no money anymore. And on top of that, we've got the joys of seasonal flus and COVID, and all the stress that puts on the workforce. So I'm just a bit nervous that this is on the risk register, but I'd like some assurance that we have got this and we are doing the best we can in looking after our workforce, but equally providing a service to the general public, because we've got 3 horrible things coming together at the same time. And I know myself, having managed these aspects of the risk register as well, that maybe you guys need to take this aside and make sure that all those things holistically are being looked at and you've got a handle on them, or else they're just going to pop up and it'd be too late to deal with them. So I hope those ramblings did make some sense.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. I do understand that, and I would be remiss if I didn't also have those same concerns. And as such, I will take away and we will review those risks again and the implications and mitigations surrounding them. But thank you very much for your point in the right direction.
Might I suggest, Helen, that when we brief on the workforce report, not only being on the staff survey, but that we address the 3 amber risks next time around, sorry, the type is very small, whether we have a risk of insufficient workforce and resilience, the health, safety and well-being of our workforce, and staff resilience at time of pressure are all there at ambers. So while we're listening to the responses from the staff survey, it would be very interesting for us to be able to cross-refer to risk register. So could we have those bits of the risk register updated at that meeting and in a form that is slightly larger print because that might help us, just so that we are triangulating across different areas of our responsibility, because that might help us formulate recommendations whilst we have executive and staff side in the room, that might help take things forward. So if we're able to pull that all together, I think that's the gist of what Councillor Lowry was saying, and he would be able to report that back to Audit and Governance Committee as actually seeing in practice the implications of their recommendation that Scrutiny see this report. Okay, on that one. Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks, Chair. My question was, it's on page 49 or page 3 of the report, KPI 15. I'm just wondering why KPI 15 isn't RAG rated. A public satisfaction figure of 38% doesn't sound too impressive to me. Looking at the annotation, the national satisfaction figure is only 4 points above, so it's not quite as bad as might be expected, but that seems pretty awful to me. 38% public satisfaction. The reasons I think we aren't looking at the right KPIs in my view, and I raised that last time. We're going to have the KPI review sometime, but is there a reason for not reg rating KPI 15, please?
Yeah, through you, Chair. We are currently reviewing that measure. It's an index measure based on a number of different measures. We're not sure that those measures adequately reflect what is customer experience. So, for example, a good number of them concern internal processes of the council, which might not necessarily have an effect on customer experience, although some definitely will. So, for example, changes to circumstance for council tax will have an impact on someone in terms of its processing time, quite likely. Perhaps FOIs less so. So I think that's the issue, if that's the indicator you're referring to. Thank you, Chair.
Indicator 15 is specifically traffic flow.
I'm happy with the response. It's a mixture of circumstances.
It's, yeah, absolutely, through your chat, absolutely, yeah. It's going to be reviewed, and certainly Councillor Wheeler can let you know what we do as a result of that review.
Any more on that? Councillor Lowry.
Ross, you pointed out that obviously this report is somewhat out of date, and household recycling waste, always a very topical issue, of course, and you're only reporting against Q1 year, obviously, but during that period of time, that's when we stopped collecting garden waste. So from my previous understanding, the percentage of recycling that is made up of our collection of garden waste, and therefore is considered as recycling, is quite considerable. I think from memory, even half of that is literally garden waste collection. That being the case, are there any implications to us in respect of statutory government directions, fines, loss of grants, so on and so forth, as a consequence of our recycling rates halving this year, which they undoubtedly will, and along with understanding the reduction in percentage collection of waste, it would be good to understand the implications of, dare I say, I suspect brown waste is being used more. I know I am, as a consequence of having no garden waste collection, and I know I'm also going to the tip more, and so there's probably more usage there. So it would be good to understand holistic costs and implications of that decision at some stage, sooner rather than later, noting that, as you responded to Councillor Lang, this item will be considered in the budget for the next financial year. Thank you.
Before we get an answer on that one, just triangulating that back to the earlier response we got, which was garden waste is disposed of, not composted. The recycling of garden waste is through composting. So if we're disposing of it through either landfill or burning it, then we're not recycling it. And therefore, does garden waste count towards our recycling stuff if it's not being recycled? So there is a whole ball game there within garden waste that I think needs looking at. Councillor Shea, you look.
If I respond in saying that it's an awfully complicated question, and to make sure that I get the exact information to you that you require, I'll take that away and make sure you get a written response.
Thank you, Councillor Shea. I think that's perfectly understandable given it is complex and we have triangulated it back to a previous performance report. Sorry, we're trying to do what we're told to do at Scrutiny and tie up the bits of information and ask awkward questions. So.
I feel suitably tied up.
I just have one question myself on this report. I think other areas have been covered. Looking at page 64 of the pack, which is page 18 of the report, I know residents who feel safe during the day in the city is a 2020 figure, but that was on a beginning to go downwards. Meanwhile, antisocial behaviour incidents reported to the council are rising, and number of early interventions to antisocial behaviour are falling. So people are telling us more about antisocial behaviour. They're feeling less safe at the day in the city, and the number of interventions we're making are falling. I know this isn't your area, Councillor Shea, but could we get a written response from Community Connections about what we're doing to close the gap between trying to prevent antisocial behaviour and the increase in antisocial behaviour? Because antisocial behaviour is one of those things that are low level, not crime, but can make people feel unsafe. So if it's going up and the prevention work is going down and people are feeling more unsafe, we have a little triangulation there as well, which is all on that top third of a page. So I haven't even had to look at another report for it. I do know anecdotally in my own ward that people aren't reporting things because they've lost track on who to report it to, because everyone's telling them it's not their problem, it's someone else's. So if we've got an increase in antisocial behaviour reporting at a point that the public are telling me the police say it's the council say it's the police, we're fed up reporting it to either, so we're reporting it to neither, then we have an issue on antisocial behaviour. That's quite often a precursor to growth in other crime areas. So I don't expect you to answer that one, Councillor Shea. It's not your portfolio area and it's not finance, but if we could get an appropriate answer, that would be helpful, I think.
Certainly, Chair. Received and understood.
So no, I'm not going to ask you to sub for someone else because it's not your job today. But I think it's the sort of thing that these performance indicators can show us that might actually lead us to further problems down the road that are much bigger for the council. So that was just one I spotted. Anything else on the corporate performance?
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Are you taking the risk register with this item?
Yes, yes.
I have a
A
point
further
on the risk
question?
register.
Yes, go on.
Page 86, in fact, the treatment of the pension fund, the way we want to capitalise the deficit. The district auditor, sorry, the external auditor is disagreeing with us. Do we have a statement from him of why he disagrees, or she?
Through you, Chair. Through you, Chair. I think an accounting solution has been come to. I can't give you the details here now. It is something that the Audit and Governance Committee is looking at every meeting. I expect there to be a further update at audit in November, but happy to provide an update when it's available to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on that one? No. Picking up on your comments earlier, Ross, we have 2 red and 1 amber issue relating to IT. as far as I can see. And like everyone else, this is where we all start peering at according to what sort of glasses we've got and where they hit on the varifocals. Issues of cyber attack are red rated still, IT supply constraints and data security is there as an amber. I think we should add to our work programme something around cyber security in terms of attack, supply of equipment and data security to have a look at. It probably won't be November, but maybe we look at it in February, because I think with three differing items on the risk register all relating to IT, it would be worth us having a little poke and see what we find. Councillor Partridge.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. On the back of that, I think we should know if we can. I know it limits us if we can get that in sooner. I was doing some research into the cost to the taxpayer when the NHS suffered a massive cyber attack. Monetary wise, it ran into the multi-millions. I'd hate that to happen to the City Council. It's prevalent. There are bad actors all over the world that are seeking to do damage to the economy, both local and national, of various countries.
I think we'll have a look at timings when we look at what else we've got in and prioritisations. But obviously it is urgent. But it's how long we end up with a meeting with in November if we put everything in. So we'll work timings.
Sorry, Chair, so obviously we will give you another risk register fairly shortly. I hope obviously there'll be some movement on this. Around the supply chain, I doubt there'll be too much movement. I expect there will be around cyber security, but I'm sure we'll provide an update in February. Thank you, Chair.
We'll get to see the risk register next time, whatever, so we can make further comment, and we will look at in our chairs meeting, planning meeting, whether how we prioritise the November and February meetings, what's in them. Obviously, election reform does need to be in next time, and I think workforce probably does as well, given that we've raised issues both here and elsewhere. So, but we'll see how many we can squash into the meeting to give adequate time. Anything else on performance and risk? No. Welcome, Ross. Sorry you've been kept waiting. This is another one which is a report back from 6 months ago where we were given an update on the business support review, and we just said, okay, that's great to hear as it's starting, but is there any chance of an update in 6 months' time to see how it's bedded in? And we have that update in front of us. So are there any questions on the update for Ross? And this is pages 87 to 92 of the main pack. Councillor Lowry.
Ross, if we can go to page 90, section 3, adapting business support and learning lessons, bullet point number 7, which reads, increased demand in children's services, community connections, contact centre, and other people and community teams having a knock-on effect on business support delivery times. Resolving this is a critical driver for developing the business support to become more flexible and resilient from an operation perspective. I don't know if you were able to hear our deliberations around our concerns with the finance papers earlier on, but there seems to be a theme here. So can you give us some assurance that something's happening, I suppose, really, in children's services? Because I don't have that feeling, and I'd like someone to give us that, please.
Okay, I think Andy's in the room. We might have further information if I don't provide a suitable response. But in terms of children's, I can't go into too much detail, and I did hear the tail end of the conversation earlier, which is a wider issue, but it is having a knock-on effect on business support, the back office support services for administering all the things that we need to do in order to provide that service to those clients in children's has increased as a result of their demands. And so trying to keep on top of that has been and is a continuing challenge for business support across all of its areas. And it's not limited to just children, as that bullet point relates to. Anna Constantinu, who was new into the post, who wasn't in the post when we came originally back earlier in the year, is now in post, and this is a major part of her, of her business plan in terms of making business support a sustainable part of the organisation and driving out value where it can. And I can't speak on her behalf, but I do know that this was the part that she wrote, and that's a fundamental building block for business support going forwards. I can take an action to address with Anna to provide more detail on the approaches we're taking, how that's happening, the engagement, and kind of really how SLAs or internal SLAs, operating level agreements, if you like, are being put in place to make sure that that's not having a negative effect on the kind of areas of business support are focused on. But I don't have a great deal of detail on children's itself, Councillor Lowry.
Andy, I think he's going to come in as well.
Thank you, Chair. So I think just on the children's side, so obviously Sharon's new in post, and I don't want to speak for her, but she has, as part of the budget setting process, now set out, her objectives and her plan for the coming year, and that includes improvements and reductions in spend across her directorate, totaling I think it's about £5.275 million for 23-24, and likewise, business support is not immune from growth. So unfortunately, when there's growth and demand on services, business support doesn't increase its overhead or its staffing. So we're having to find new and innovative ways to do things differently. So you won't see this at this meeting, but as part of the transformation programme, there are 2 corporate reviews happening, one business case that's been signed off, which one is around process automation, and that's going to focus very much in the next 6 months on business support, and that will contribute further savings, and a review of corporate systems, all of our corporate systems, and that business case is coming to Change Board in December. Thank you.
Chair, I welcome the update from Ross and Mr. Rolfs, and I'm pleased to see that those papers were going forward. But I want someone to take this nervousness away from me about children's services. £4 million this year, plus £4 million last year, and just keep going round and round this boy. And we've seen the overspend. We talked about a deep dive. We talked about improvements. We talked about reductions. We talked about 5.275 million next year. The impact on business support. The impact on corporate support. Chair, I think you said earlier on when we discussed this matter that you've asked for an update or so on and so forth. And I know Councillor Lang, at her panel in the future, are going to look at certain things, but I'm just not confident that we've got a grip on this, that we're going to get children's services back to a position where we recognise it needs to be, and I don't know what to say really. I almost feel like we need to call an extraordinary joint meeting between the 2 boards, and get the cabinet members there, along with the chief executive, dare I say, and the service director, to explain the measures that are being taken and show us the business plan and show us the timeline and show us that they're going to do this and it's going to be addressed, because else I can just see myself repeating the same thing in a couple of months time. Sorry, I don't wish to keep going on, but there's something not right here, and someone needs to take this away and give us the assurance that they've got a grip on children's services with respect to its financial pressures and how they're going to deal with it.
I share your concerns, Councillor Lowry. I think one of the reasons I've said a number of times, referring back to tracking decisions, is that we did ask for some very specific information around children's services last time, and it hasn't come forward, and that means I am, like you, concerned, and I've mentioned that earlier, and I think officers have taken that away. I hope officers have taken that away, because I have spotted Councillor Shea making copious notes on those areas where I have raised concerns. I believe, Councillor Lang, you've got a panel meeting this Thursday where you'll be raising a lot of these same issues. I wonder whether we could invite you to come back here, not as a voting member of our panel, but to sit in our discussion next time to give us reassurance on all these areas of children's things, because they will crop up on our panel again, because we do take an overarching view, and you'll be able to bring the experience of your panel and your discussions this week, and then we can do stuff. I think we should also raise this at the management board, Ross, our next formal meeting, public meeting. I know we've been talking about it in our planning meetings, but in our formal meeting, I think we do need to raise these concerns and look at how management board also respond to that in terms of joint working to try and resolve that. If Councillor Lang is happy with that as chair of the other panel.
I am happy to do that. I don't know if it's helpful also then if you ask the cabinet member for children to come as well. And what I would say about it is I understand the reasons for all of it. We all understand the reasons: complex placements, bespoke placements, you know, placement sufficiency in Plymouth, having to go outside of Plymouth, all those things. We have got a new Director of Children's Services, but what we need to see is, as I say, we can all sit here and understand the reasons why this is happening. We need to understand what the plan is to start mitigating this, because as Councillor Larry says, you know, it's year on year this is happening. More money is being sent into that budget, and slowly, if we don't stop it, it's going to be dragging us all over the cliff with it. Thank you. But yes, I'd be happy to do that.
So, Councillor Lowry, if you're happy for a discussion this week at Management Board later this month, back here next month with the Cabinet Member responsible for Children's Services being called to this panel to talk about finance as well, and if necessary, Management Board setting up a group specifically to look at this issue. Councillor Shea is nodding his head, so I'm not getting a sense from the administration that there would be opposition to us trying to help put some light and some suggestions into this.
Yeah, certainly not, Chair. You're pushing against an open door here.
Thank you. So we'll keep you updated as we go through those solutions, and obviously do feel free to watch Councillor Lang's session on Thursday if you want to hear the latest and see some of the discussion that's happening there. I have just realised, without a prod from officers, that I haven't actually gone through and done the recommendations on some of the papers. Those that were just to note, can we assume those were just to note? Because I don't think we've added any recommendations. We've had discussion and added tracking type things rather than recommendations. So on all those other papers, are we happy to note the reports with all those suggestions that we've added to tracking and work programme? Thank you. We'll just feed those back into the minutes as necessary, can't we, Hannah? Thank you, and sorry for not doing that at the time. So moving on, and I'm sorry we are 3/4 of an hour late. I think Councillor Patel doesn't seem to be with us, who has the next two papers. And I'm not going to ask you to stay to do things you're, although I'm sure that you are fully cognizant of both leisure services and bereavement services. Go and feel better, and thank you for your time with us today. Well, it could be that Councillor Patel is somewhere else in the building at the moment.
Thank you very much, Chair.
So he's on his way, so thank you very much. We have two papers now in front of us, or two discussion topics in front of us. we think that they're both going to need to end up moving into a part 2 discussion, purely because we are likely to get into issues of commercial confidentiality or around employment or other issues that are not appropriate to discuss in public. So the proposal I'm going to make is that we start both discussions in part 1 and then move into part 2 and finish both discussions, rather than starting in part 1, going to part 2, coming back into part 1 and going back into part 2, because that isn't particularly easy for members of the public to follow. I'm going to go with what's easier for members of the public on this one, and we will have to work around it ourselves. So we will start with leisure services and then do bereavement, and then go and do the formal stuff to move into part 2 and pick up any of those bits in part 2. I think at our last meeting we had identified that we wished to talk about leisure services in part 2 because there were a number of issues there that we felt were that, and we have a part 2 paper on bereavement. So we know we're going to do it. I'm just trying to plan in advance of that. So apologies that we're running late. As you can imagine, there's a lot on our agenda at the moment, and I know some of you have been listening in. I don't think we've been wasting our time. We've been doing our best to scrutinise some really complex areas and throw some light on that. So leisure services, and on both leisure and bereavement, we've asked for 5-minute presentations so that we can move then into discussion. On leisure services, we haven't had a paper, so I am aware that we are all not in a particularly good position to scrutinise in future. Can we have written reports for things on the agendas, especially when they are there as key topics for discussion, and these are our 2 key topics for today. So leisure services, over to you, Councillor Patel, Ruth and David.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you said, yes, you're right, we haven't had any papers and what have you. So I'll hand straight over to Ruth to do that presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Thank you, Chair. We have prepared a presentation that we were planning to present in part 2 because of, as you mentioned, it has significant information, commercial information. So perhaps if I just give a very quick summary under part 1 of where we are with Plymouth Active Leisure. I know that this was presented to the previous meeting as well, but in terms of an update, things are progressing very well with Plymouth Active Leisure. We will give details in part 2, but certainly across all of the categories that we look at with membership, we're seeing an increasing membership, increasing take-up. So really good in terms of the participation in sport and leisure in the city. So there's some very positive elements there. There's been quite a lot of progress around the management structures and putting together the structures that exist to support Plymouth Active Leisure. And in fact, we have just started our recruitment processes for a Chief Operating Officer. So Louise, as you will know, is doing a fantastic job as the interim as we've done the transition, and we're now looking to recruit to that post permanently. Obviously, we have had 1 or 2 issues with ageing equipment and things like that, which I'm sure members will be aware of. However, we are overcoming those. So boiler at the swimming pool, etc., has been overcome. And currently things are going very well with that. So in terms of further details, I think they are for part 2, Chair, if I may leave it at that.
Thank you. Are there any quick questions under part 1, or are members happy with us having had that update for the public to then move the rest of the discussion on Plymouth Active Leisure to part 2? I'm not seeing any questions at this point, so thanks for that update, Ruth. So now moving on to bereavement services, we have pages 13 to 18 in the first to follow pack as an update for the part 1 section of the meeting. Don't know, Councillor Patel or Ruth, are you quickly going to say anything on this one, or are you happy just to go for questioning on the that paper.
I haven't got anything to say unless Ruth has.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So this paper is our an update on all the things we asked to happen at the last meeting in terms of the Part 1 activity. Are there any questions on that before we move into the stuff that is more commercially confidential? No, I'm not seeing that. I would like to say a very big thank you to officers who facilitated the visits that we requested, and especially for the work in setting up the cross-party oversight group to ensure cross-party buy-in to such a big capital programme. We appreciate that and the work that you've been doing through that. So thank you very much. We appreciate that enormously. And on that basis, I'm not seeing any further hands. Members, I would like to ask us to consider passing a resolution under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972 to exclude the press and public from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 of Part 1 of Section 12A of the Act as amended by the Freedom of Information Act 2000. And the items we will be considering are the Leisure Services Contract and Bereavement Services. Do I have a seconder for that proposition? Thank you, Councillor Partridge and Councillor Wheeler. I think that was a pretty much tie that time. Are members in favour? Thank you. In which case we will move into part 2. There are no members of the public or the